The dust-laden wind carried the scent of desperation as Madeline Hayes staggered down the main street of Carlin, Nevada in the summer of 1878, her 3-year-old daughter Emma clinging to her skirts. The journey had depleted their meager resources, leaving them with nothing but the clothes on their backs and the crushing weight of uncertainty. Madeline's husband had been dead 6 months now, consumption taking him swiftly and without mercy, leaving her to face the harsh realities of the frontier alone. "Mama, I'm hungry," Emma whimpered, her small face pinched with discomfort. "When can we eat?" "Soon, darling," Madeline promised, though she had no idea how she would fulfill that promise. Her hands shook as she adjusted her threadbare shawl around her shoulders, partly from hunger and partly from fear. The last of their food had been consumed that morning, a stale piece of bread shared between them that did little to satisfy their gnawing hunger. Carlin had seemed like a beacon of hope when she'd heard about it back in Missouri, a growing railroad town with opportunities for those willing to work. But standing on its dusty street now, with businesses closing for the evening and strangers eyeing her with suspicion, that hope was fading fast. "Excuse me," she attempted to approach a well-dressed woman exiting the general store. "I'm looking for work. Any kind of." The woman quickened her pace, clutching her parcels tighter as if Madeline might steal them. This wasn't the first rejection she'd faced since arriving in town 2 hours earlier. Emma tugged at her skirt again. "Mama, please. My tummy hurts." Madeline knelt down, her own stomach cramping painfully. "I know, sweet pea. Mama's trying." The sun was setting now, casting long shadows across the street. The thought of spending another night outdoors made Madeline's chest tighten with dread. They'd slept in a barn the previous night, the farmer unaware of their presence. Tonight, she wasn't sure where they would go. "Madam, are you all right?" The deep voice startled her. She looked up to find a tall man standing a few feet away, his expression guarded but not unkind. His clothes marked him as a working man, worn denim pants, a simple shirt with the sleeves rolled up, revealing tanned, muscular forearms, and a hat that had seen better days. "We're fine," she said automatically, pride making her voice sharper than intended. "Just resting a moment." "Mama," Emma whispered loudly, "I'm still hungry." The man's gaze shifted to the child, then back to Madeline, taking in her trembling hands and the dark circles beneath her eyes. "When's the last time either of you ate?" he asked, his voice gentler now. Madeline hesitated, torn between honesty and pride. "This morning," she finally admitted. "We had some bread." The man nodded slowly, as if making a decision. "I'm Isaac Owens," he said. "I have a ranch just outside of town." He gestured toward the west. "There's stew on the stove. You'll eat in my kitchen tonight." Madeline stiffened, instantly wary. She'd learned early in life that men rarely offered help without expecting something in return. "That's very kind, but we couldn't impose," she said, struggling to her feet and taking Emma's hand. "It's not an imposition," Isaac insisted, "and it's just food. No strings attached." As if sensing her hesitation, he added, "My housekeeper, Mrs. Finch, will be there. She's a respectable widow who keeps my house in order and helps with the cooking." Emma looked up at her mother with pleading eyes. "Please, Mama." Madeline weighed her options quickly. They were hungry, tired, and without prospects for the night. This man seemed decent enough, and the mention of a housekeeper provided some reassurance. "All right," she conceded. "Thank you, Mr. Owens." "Isaac," he corrected with a slight smile. "My wagon's over by the livery. If you'll follow me." The short wagon ride out of town was mostly silent, save for Emma's occasional questions about the horses pulling them. Isaac answered each one patiently, his deep voice taking on a gentler tone when addressing the child. "Do you have horses at your ranch?" Emma asked, her earlier complaints of hunger momentarily forgotten in the excitement of the ride. "I do," Isaac replied. "About 30 of them. Some for working cattle, others for breeding." "I like horses," Emma declared. "Papa used to let me sit on our old mare sometimes." Madeline saw Isaac glance her way, curiosity in his gaze, but he didn't press for details. The ranch house came into view as they rounded a bend in the road. It was larger than Madeline had expected, a two-story structure with a wide porch and several outbuildings nearby. A barn stood to one side, and beyond it, she could make out corrals and pastureland in the fading light. "Here we are," Isaac announced, bringing the wagon to a stop in front of the house. As promised, they were greeted by Mrs. Finch, a plump, gray-haired woman with keen eyes that missed nothing as she looked Madeline and Emma over. "Mrs. Finch, these are our guests for dinner," Isaac explained. He paused, realizing he hadn't asked her name. "Hayes," Madeline supplied. "Madeline Hayes, and this is my daughter, Emma." Mrs. Finch's expression softened slightly. "Well, you're just in time. The stew's been simmering all afternoon." The kitchen was warm and inviting, smelling of beef, herbs, and freshly baked bread. Madeline's stomach growled audibly as Mrs. Finch ladled generous portions of stew into bowls and placed a basket of bread on the table. "Eat up now," the housekeeper encouraged. "There's plenty more." Emma didn't need to be told twice. She dug in with an enthusiasm that would have been inappropriate in politer company, but neither Isaac nor Mrs. Finch seemed to mind. Madeline forced herself to eat more slowly, though it took considerable effort. "Good?" Isaac asked, watching them with an expression Madeline couldn't quite define. "Very," she admitted. "Thank you." As they ate, Mrs. Finch kept up a steady stream of chatter, filling the silence with local news and gossip. Madeline learned that Isaac had inherited the ranch from his uncle 5 years ago and had built it into one of the more successful operations in the area. He wasn't married, which explained the presence of a housekeeper, and was well respected in Carlin. When they'd eaten their fill, Mrs. Finch cleared the table despite Madeline's offer to help. Emma's eyes were growing heavy, the day's trials and a full stomach finally catching up to her. "You both look exhausted," Isaac observed. "Where are you staying in town?" Madeline hesitated. "We haven't secured lodging yet," she said carefully. "We just got to Carlin today," Emma added helpfully. "We slept in a barn last night, and Mama said it wasn't proper, but we didn't have a choice." Madeline felt her face flush with embarrassment. "Emma, that's enough." Isaac exchanged a look with Mrs. Finch, some unspoken communication passing between them. "We have spare rooms," he said. "You're welcome to stay the night. Mrs. Finch can show you up." "I couldn't possibly. It's getting dark," Isaac pointed out reasonably. "And it's a long walk back to town." "The rooms are clean," Mrs. Finch added, "and it would be no trouble." Madeline wanted to refuse, to preserve what little pride she had left, but the thought of dragging Emma back to town to sleep rough was enough to overcome her reluctance. "Just for tonight," she agreed, "and I insist on working to repay your kindness. I can cook, clean, mend clothing, whatever you need." Isaac nodded. "We can discuss that in the morning. For now, get some rest. The bedroom Mrs. Finch led them to was simple but comfortable, with a large bed that promised the best sleep Madeline had had in weeks. Emma was asleep almost before Madeline finished washing her face and hands with the water provided in a porcelain basin. Alone with her thoughts, Madeline sat on the edge of the bed, wondering how she had come to this point. 6 months ago, she'd been a respectable farmer's wife in Missouri. Now she was accepting charity from a stranger, with no clear path forward. Yet as she glanced at Emma sleeping peacefully, her cheeks still round with the remnants of baby fat, Madeline felt a renewed determination. For her daughter's sake, she would find a way to build a new life. Morning came with the sounds of a working ranch rooster's crowing, horses nickering, and the low murmur of men's voices as the hands began their day. Madeline dressed quickly and helped Emma do the same, then made their way downstairs. Mrs. Finch was already bustling around the kitchen, frying bacon and mixing batter for biscuits. "Good morning," she greeted them warmly. "Sleep well." "Better than I have in months," Madeline admitted. "Please, let me help you." Mrs. Finch hesitated only briefly before handing over the biscuit dough. "You can roll these out and cut them if you like. Isaac will be in shortly. He likes to check on things in the barn before breakfast." As if on cue, the back door opened, and Isaac stepped inside. He'd already been working for some time, judging by the sweat dampening his shirt and the dust on his boots. "Morning," he nodded to Madeline, then smiled at Emma. "Sleep well, little one?" "Yes, sir," Emma replied. "Your house is very nice." Isaac chuckled. "I'm glad you approve." He turned to Madeline. "I've been thinking about what you said last night, about working to repay the lodging." Madeline tensed, waiting. "Mrs. Finch has been saying for months that she could use some help around here. The place is too big for one person to manage, especially with all the hands to cook for." "You have ranch hands who eat here?" Madeline asked, surprised. "Not all meals," Mrs. Finch clarified, "but lunch most days and sometimes dinner if they're working late. It's a lot of cooking for these growing boys." "If you're interested," Isaac continued, "there's a position here for you. Room and board for you and your daughter plus wages. It wouldn't be much at first, but—" "Yes," Madeline said quickly, before he could change his mind. "I mean, I would be very interested in the position." Isaac nodded, satisfied. "Good. Mrs. Finch can show you the ropes after breakfast." The days that followed fell into a rhythm. Madeline rose early with Mrs. Finch to prepare breakfast for Isaac and the hands. The mornings were spent cleaning the house, washing clothes, or preserving food from the kitchen garden. Afternoons were devoted to preparing the midday meal, after which Madeline would have a few hours to spend with Emma before starting dinner preparations. Emma thrived in the ranch environment. Isaac had introduced her to a gentle old mare named Daisy, and one of the younger hands, Tommy, had been tasked with giving her short rides around the corral when his other duties allowed. The child's pallor soon gave way to sun-kissed cheeks, and her formerly listless demeanor was replaced with boundless energy. As for Isaac, he was often away from the house during the day, attending to the countless tasks required to keep the ranch running. But he always made time to inquire after their comfort, and Madeline often caught him watching her when he thought she wasn't looking. A month into their stay, Madeline was hanging laundry in the yard when she heard Emma's delighted squeal from the direction of the corral. Looking up, she saw Isaac leading Daisy with Emma perched proudly on the mare's back. "Mama, look, I'm riding all by myself," Emma called out, though Isaac's hand was firmly on the lead rope. "I see that," Madeline replied, smiling at her daughter's joy. "You're becoming quite the horsewoman. Isaac says I can learn to ride proper soon. With a saddle and everything." Madeline glanced at Isaac, who shrugged. "She's a natural," he said, "and Daisy's as gentle as they come." "Well, we'll see," Madeline hedged, not wanting to disappoint Emma but uncertain about the idea of her small daughter on a horse without someone leading it. Later, after Emma had been put to bed with stories of brave cowboys and their trusty steeds, Madeline found Isaac on the porch, smoking a cigarette and staring out at the star-filled sky. "She idolizes you, you know," Madeline said, stepping outside. Isaac turned, surprised. "Emma? She's a good kid. Smart, too." "She is," Madeline agreed. "And I want to thank you again for all you've done for us. Not just the job and the roof over our heads, but for being kind to her. She lost her father so suddenly, and the journey here was difficult. Isaac nodded, a question in his eyes that he didn't voice. Madeline hesitated, then decided it was time to share her story. My husband, Thomas, died of consumption in January. We had a small farm in Missouri, but it wasn't doing well even before he fell ill. After he was gone, there was nothing to keep us there. I heard about opportunities out west, and Carlin seemed as good a destination as any. You're a brave woman, Mrs. Hayes. Madeline, please, she said. And I'm not brave, just desperate. If you hadn't found us when you did. She didn't finish the thought. They both knew what might have happened. Well, I'm glad I did, Isaac said simply. And I hope you'll stay on. Both of you. The place feels different with you here. Something in his tone made Madeline look at him more closely. In the moonlight, his features were softened, the usual reserve in his expression replaced with something warmer. Different how? She asked softly. Isaac seemed to struggle with his words. More alive, he finally said. More like a home and less like just a house. The admission hung between them, weighted with unspoken possibilities. Madeline felt a flutter in her chest that had nothing to do with fear or hunger. I should get some rest, she said, suddenly unsure of herself. Tomorrow's baking day. Isaac nodded. Good night, Madeline. Good night, Isaac. As summer gave way to fall, the ranch prepared for the coming winter. Hay was cut and stored. Livestock was counted and assessed, and the last of the garden's bounty was preserved in jars that lined the pantry shelves. Madeline found herself increasingly involved in the running of the household, with Mrs. Finch gradually ceding more responsibilities to her. These old bones aren't what they used to be, the housekeeper confided one evening as they sat mending clothes by the fire. I've been thinking about moving to town, to be closer to my sister. Madeline looked up in surprise. But what would Isaac do without you? You've been with him since he inherited the ranch. Mrs. Finch's eyes twinkled knowingly. I think he'd manage just fine, especially if a certain young widow were to stay on. Mrs. Finch. Madeline felt her face grow warm. I don't know what you're implying, but, oh, hush now. I got eyes in my head. I see the way he looks at you when you're not watching. And I see the way you look at him, too. Madeline couldn't deny it, at least not to herself. Over the past months, her feelings for Isaac had grown from gratitude into something deeper. She admired his quiet strength, his unwavering kindness, and the gentle way he interacted with Emma. But she'd been careful not to let those feelings show, mindful of her position as his employee. Even if there were feelings, she said carefully, it wouldn't be proper. I work for him. Arrangements can change, Mrs. Finch replied sagely. Just think about it. The first snow came early that year, blanketing the ranch in white overnight. Emma was beside herself with excitement, having rarely seen snow in Missouri. Bundled up in warm clothing borrowed from a trunk of old things Mrs. Finch had found in the attic, she dashed outside the moment breakfast was cleared away. Madeline watched from the porch as Isaac showed Emma how to make snowballs, laughing when one of hers caught him squarely in the chest. Their breaths formed clouds in the cold air, their cheeks reddened by the chill. He'd make a good father, Mrs. Finch observed, appearing beside Madeline with 2 steaming mugs of coffee. Madeline accepted one of the mugs, warming her hands around it. Emma certainly adores him, and he adores her. But it's not just Emma he has eyes for. Before Madeline could formulate a response, Emma came running toward the porch, her face alight with joy. Mama, Isaac says we can build a snowman. Will you help us? Unable to resist her daughter's enthusiasm, Madeline set down her coffee. I suppose I could spare a few minutes. Those few minutes turned into an hour of laughter and play, culminating in a snow woman complete with an old bonnet Mrs. Finch contributed and a carrot for a nose. By the time they finished, Madeline's fingers were numb despite her mittens, and Emma's cheeks were bright red from the cold. "Inside with you now," Mrs. Finch called from the door. "I've got hot chocolate warming on the stove." As they stamped the snow from their boots on the porch, Isaac's hand brushed against Madeline's, sending a warmth through her that had nothing to do with the promised hot chocolate. "Thank you for indulging her," Madeline said softly. "It's no indulgence," Isaac replied. Having both of you here has been." He trailed off, searching for words. "Yes," Madeline prompted. Isaac's gaze met hers, intensity in his blue eyes. "I've been alone a long time, Madeline. Ever since my parents died when I was 18, it's just been me. Even when Uncle Frank was alive, he wasn't much for company. But now, with you and Emma here, the house feels like more than just a place to sleep between workdays." Madeline's heart quickened. "I know what you mean. After Thomas died, I thought I'd never feel at home anywhere again. But here, Isaac encouraged when she didn't continue. "Here I've found peace," she admitted. "And something I thought I'd lost forever." "What's that?" "Hope," she said simply. Their gazes held for a long moment, something unspoken passing between them. Then Emma's voice called from inside, breaking the spell. "Mama, the chocolate's getting cold." "Coming, darling?" Madeline called back, reluctantly stepping away from Isaac. As the winter deepened, the ranch settled into a quieter routine. With fewer outdoor tasks demanding immediate attention, Isaac spent more time around the house, making repairs he'd been putting off or working on the account books in the small study off the main room. Madeline found herself inventing reasons to be near him, bringing him coffee, asking his opinion on meal plans, or simply sitting in the same room with her mending while he worked. These quiet moments built a comfortable intimacy between them, a shared space where words weren't always necessary. Emma, too, spent more time with Isaac, sitting on his knee in the evenings while he read to her from one of the few books in the house, or learning simple card games that kept her entertained on days when the weather was too harsh for outside play. One evening in late January, after Emma had been put to bed, Madeline found Isaac sitting alone by the fire, staring into the flames with a pensive expression. "Is everything all right?" she asked, taking the chair opposite his. He looked up, seeming to come back from far away. "Just thinking about the future." "Oh? And what does the future hold for the Owens Ranch?" Isaac's expression turned serious. "That depends." "On what?" "On whether certain people might consider making their stay here permanent." Madeline's breath caught. "Isaac, hear me out," he said quickly. "I know it hasn't been that long since you lost your husband, and I don't want to rush you. But I need you to know that my feelings for you have grown far beyond simple friendship." Madeline felt a surge of emotion, joy mingled with a touch of guilt. "I care for you too," she admitted. "More than I thought possible. But I worry about what people might think. A widow with a child, moving so quickly." "People will always talk," Isaac said dismissively. "What matters is what's right for you, for Emma, and if you'll allow it for me." "And what do you think is right?" Madeline asked softly. Isaac leaned forward, his expression earnest. "I think we've been given a second chance at happiness, both of us. I lost my family young, you lost your husband. But together we could build something new, something strong." "Are you proposing Isaac Owens?" Madeline asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "I suppose I am," he replied with a small smile, "though I had planned something more romantic than a fireside chat." Madeline laughed softly, tears pricking at her eyes. "I don't need romance. I just need honesty and kindness, both of which you've shown me from the moment we met." "Is that a yes, then?" Madeline considered everything that had brought her to this moment, the grief, the journey, the desperate hunger that had led her to accept a stranger's kindness. And then all that had followed, the growing comfort between them, the way Emma had blossomed under Isaac's care, and the feelings that had taken root in her own heart. "Yes," she said finally, her voice firm despite the tears now flowing freely. "Yes, I will marry you, Isaac." The joy that spread across his face was like sunrise breaking over the mountains. He rose from his chair and knelt before her, taking her hands in his. "I promise to be a good husband to you and a good father to Emma," he vowed. "To protect and provide for you both, and to love you with everything I have for as long as I live." Madeline leaned forward, pressing her forehead against his. "And I promise to stand by your side through whatever comes, to make this house a home filled with love, and to never forget the kindness you showed us when we had nothing." Their lips met in a gentle kiss, sealing the promises they had made. When they finally drew apart, Isaac kept her hands in his thumbs tracing circles on her palms. "There's something else," he said. "Mrs. Finch has decided to retire and move to town after the wedding. Her sister's been asking her to come for years. She mentioned she was considering it," Madeline acknowledged. "But I didn't realize she'd made a decision. She wants to give us space to be a proper family," Isaac explained. "Though she's promised to visit often, especially once the weather improves." Madeline smiled at that. Mrs. Finch had become like family to her over the months, a mentor and friend who had helped ease her transition to ranch life. "We'll have her for Sunday dinners," Madeline decided. "And holidays." Agreed. They were married in early spring, when the first wildflowers were beginning to dot the meadows around the ranch. It was a simple ceremony, performed by the circuit preacher who visited Carlin once a month. Mrs. Finch stood as witness, beaming with approval, while Emma served as an impromptu flower girl, scattering petals from the first blooms of the season. The ranch hands and a few neighbors gathered afterward for a celebratory meal, bringing dishes to share and offering good wishes to the newly formed family. Madeline, now Mrs. Owens, found herself watching her daughter throughout the festivities, marveling at the change in her since that desperate day in Carlin. Emma was laughing, her face healthy and full, as Tommy showed her how to do a simple two-step to the fiddle music one of the hands was playing. Her dress was new, sewn by Madeline from fabric Isaac had brought back from his last trip to town, and her hair was neatly braided with ribbons. "Penny for your thoughts," Isaac said, coming to stand beside his new wife. "I was just thinking about how far we've come," Madeline replied. "A year ago, I couldn't have imagined this." Isaac slipped an arm around her waist, drawing her close to his side. "Nor could I, but I thank God every day for bringing you and Emma into my life." "Even if it was hunger and desperation that did the bringing?" she asked with a small smile. "Even so," he assured her, "though I prefer to think of it as fate." As the celebration continued around them, Madeline allowed herself to fully embrace the joy of the moment. The journey that had brought her to this place had been fraught with hardship and loss, but it had led to a new beginning she couldn't have foreseen. "Mama! Isaac! Come dance with us!" Emma called, breaking away from Tommy to run toward them. Isaac laughed and extended his hand to Madeline. "Shall we, Mrs. Owens?" "We shall, Mr. Owens," she replied, taking his hand and allowing him to lead her into the dance. 5 years later, Madeline stood on the porch of the ranch house, watching as Isaac taught their son, Thomas, to ride his first pony. At 4, the boy was the image of his father, with the same determined set to his jaw and unwavering focus. Emma, now 8, was already an accomplished rider, cantering her own horse around the corral and offering advice to her little brother. "Not too fast, Tommy," she called. "Remember to hold the reins like Isaac showed you." Madeline smiled at her daughter's protective instincts. Emma had embraced her role as big sister with enthusiasm when Thomas was born, and now with another sibling on the way, Madeline's hand rested protectively on her growing belly, she was even more determined to be a help to her parents. The ranch had prospered under Isaac and Madeline's joint stewardship. They'd expanded the herd, added more acres to their holdings, and built a new bunkhouse for the increased number of hands needed to work the larger operation. The house, too, had been expanded, with a new wing added to accommodate their growing family. Mrs. Finch visited regularly, doting on Thomas and Emma as if they were her own grandchildren. She never failed to remind Madeline of their first conversation about Isaac's feelings, taking credit for nudging them toward the happiness they now shared. "You were right, you know," Madeline had admitted to her once, "about Isaac's feelings. And mine." "Of course I was," Mrs. Finch had replied with satisfaction. "Some things are just meant to be." As Isaac helped Thomas dismount and lifted the boy onto his shoulders, his gaze met Madeline's across the yard. The love in his eyes was as clear and steady as it had been on their wedding day, undiminished by the passage of time and the challenges they had faced together. In that moment, Madeline remembered the desperate woman she had once been, standing on a dusty street with hunger gnawing at her belly and fear clutching at her heart. How far she had come from that day, when her child was hungry and her hands were shaking, and a kind cowboy had said those life-changing words, "You'll eat in my kitchen tonight." What neither of them could have known then was that his kitchen would become her kitchen, his home her home, and his heart intertwined with hers in a love story that had begun with an act of simple kindness and grown into something neither of them could have imagined. As Isaac approached with Thomas still perched on his shoulders and Emma skipping alongside them, Madeline opened her arms to embrace the family that fate and love had given her, grateful for the hunger that had led her to this fullness of heart.